Welcome to the Deep Dive, the shortcut you need to be the most informed person in the room.
Yeah.
Today, we're getting into a really fascinating corporate case study. It's the story of a company that didn't just, join the American craft beer movement.
No, not at all.
They pretty much wrote the playbook for how a founder-led brand can become a billion-dollar beverage giant.
Yeah.
We are diving deep into the Boston Beer Company, or BBCO.
It really is one of the most foundational stories in modern American business. You've got Jim Koch, the founder, who somehow manages to take this sixth-generation family beer recipe and blend it with this world-class education in finance and law. He turns it into a publicly traded empire that today sells everything from these super high-end 30% ABV specialty beers to, the hard seltzers you see everywhere.
Absolutely. And just the overview of BBCO today really proves how far they've come. It was founded back in 1984 by Jim Koch and Rhonda Coleman. Their first and, let's be honest, most famous brand was, of course, Samuel Adams. And that name was so strategic, named after the founding father who, it just so happens, had his own history in brewing.
Oh, that decision was brilliant right from the start. Tying the brand to American history, to this idea of heritage, it positioned the beer as more than just a product. It was a piece of history, a rebellion against those big, bland corporate lagers.
Yeah, a real statement.
But then you look at the scale of it now. BBCO is the fourth largest brewer in the entire United States. They're a public company trading on the New York Stock Exchange under, and this is just perfect, the ticker SAM.
And the financial scale is what really underscores this massive transformation. Just look at the numbers from 2019. Revenues were at, $1.329 billion US dollars.
It's an incredible number.
Supported by a staff of over 2,100 employees. It is just truly remarkable how a recipe that was first brewed in Jim Koch's kitchen could become that kind of financial giant in just, a little over 3 decades.
And that's exactly what our mission is today. We want to unpack the strategic moves, the academic background, the financial structure, the aggressive diversification that allowed Koch, who is widely seen as a founding father of American craft brewing, to navigate that insane growth and, in a way, outgrow the very category he helped create.
Okay, let's unpack that. We have to explore the origins of Samuel Adams, because if you just looked at Jim Koch's resume in the early 80s, you would not think brewer.
Not all.
You'd assume he was headed for a massive corporate law firm or, Wall Street. Definitely not fermentation tanks.
The founder's pedigree is so complex. It's this blend of old world tradition with this very new world high-powered education. Charles James Koch was born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1949.
Okay.
And the brewing tradition is deep in his family. He represents the sixth-generation firstborn son to follow in the family's brewing footsteps. His own father was a fifth-generation brewer.
So that family knowledge, that history, it was all there.
Yeah.
But he took this serious, high-powered academic detour first.
A major detour.
Instead of going right into brewing, he just accumulates one of the most formidable academic stacks you can imagine, all from Harvard University.
Yeah.
A Bachelor of Arts, then an MBA, and then a Juris Doctor, a law degree.
Exactly. And those degrees from Harvard are really the key to understanding the sheer business mind behind the Boston Beer Company. He wasn't just a guy who was passionate about hops and malt.
Right.
He understood corporate finance. He understood contracts, logistics, better than pretty much any other early craft brewer out there.
And before he even started brewing, he was honing those skills as a manufacturing consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, which is, a very big deal.
Top tier.
He even spent time as an Outward Bound instructor, which is just this fascinating blend of, rigorous analytical thinking and then sheer practical grit.
And that consulting background is precisely why the business plan for Samuel Adams wasn't just, scribbled on a napkin in a bar.
Yeah.
While he was at BCG, he developed the entire blueprint for a locally focused beer company. He used established, best-in-class consulting methods. He knew the gap in the market, and he knew exactly how to fill it efficiently.
Which brings us to the startup capital. It was a true bootstrap operation, really, fueled by his own investment and his professional network. Koch put in $100,000 of his own money.
And adjusted for inflation, that's closer to $300,000 today.
Wow.
So that's a serious personal risk, even for a high-level consultant at BCG.
A huge risk. And then he raised additional funds from his professional and personal network, so family, friends, former colleagues from DCG.
And that approach, leveraging his network, it ensured the early capital was, well, sophisticated. They knew what they were investing in. The company was organized as a limited liability partnership right from the start, which was a very smart move for managing liability and the early investment structure.
But for all the MBA blueprinting, the product itself came straight from the heart, right?
Absolutely. Koch brewed that initial batch in his own kitchen using his family's original recipe for something called Louis Koch lager.
Okay.
This was then tweaked a little bit and renamed Samuel Adams Boston Lager, a 4.8% ABV amber or Vienna-style lager.
And this is where the execution really meets the myth. The beer was formally introduced in March of 1985, and it was over Patriots' Day weekend.
Which is such an important historical and cultural weekend in Boston. It's tied so closely to the Boston Marathon, it was perfect timing.
So what happened next is always talked about like it was pure brewing magic. But I have to ask, was it magic or was it just incredibly smart, targeted marketing hitting a public that was just thirsty for something new?
I think it was both, and it was catalyzed by this massive high-profile win. Just 6 weeks after they launched, Samuel Adams was voted Best Beer in America at the Great American Beer Festival.
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Imagine that. You're this brand new, tiny local brew, and you're competing against 93 established national and regional beers, and you take the top prize.
That recognition had to be absolutely pivotal. It just instantly established the brand's credibility, its premium identity.
Totally. It allowed them to charge a higher price point than their competitors, which was a key element of that business plan from BCG.
And for anyone who loves historical landmarks, the first place to ever put Samuel Adams on tap was Doyle's Cafe in Jamaica Plain.
A true grassroots, authentic Boston launch. It immediately cemented the brand's local roots, even as, the founder's ambitions were clearly national, if not global.
That initial explosive success leads us right into the biggest challenge any successful startup faces. How do you scale? How do you go from a kitchen operation to national distribution while still maintaining quality and, controlling your costs?
And this is where we really see the business strategy in action, the moves that let BBCO go from a great startup story to a national giant. The immediate answer was a very strategic use of contract brewing.
Right.
It was designed to minimize how much capital they had to put out while maximizing their output.
Let's clarify what contract brewing is, because at the time, especially within the purist craft beer movement, it was pretty controversial.
It absolutely was. Contract brewing just means that Koch rented excess capacity at larger, established breweries. This let BBK scale up really, really fast without having to build their own expensive infrastructure right away.
So who were they using?
They used some big names. Pittsburgh Brewing Company, which makes Iron City, Stroh Breweries, Portland's Blitz Weinhard, and even the industry behemoth S. Ab Miller.
Wait, S. Ab Miller. Using a cornerstone of the macro brewery establishment for production. That must have created some huge tension with the whole ethos of the early anti-establishment craft movement. How did he square that?
It was a necessary tension. Koch's argument was that contract brewing allowed them to maintain quality and volume without taking on the massive debt of building their own breweries, which frankly would have probably killed the company before it even got off the ground.
So it was a pragmatic choice.
Totally. It was a financial necessity driven by the Harvard MBA, not just the sixth-generation brewer. It showed he was prioritizing business sustainability over, let's say, immediate ideological purity.
But that reliance on contracts, especially with these big, sometimes foreknown macro facilities, that's got to create logistical and quality control problems in the long run. He had to have a plan to move away from that.
He did. And the first critical step toward reducing that reliance came in 1997. That's when Koch bought the Hudepohl-Schundling Brewery in his hometown of Cincinnati.
And that was just a fantastic piece of corporate history, wasn't it? The same brewery where his own father had apprenticed back in the 1940s.
Yeah, it blended that personal significance with a really smart strategic asset acquisition.
It must have felt like coming full circle.
Absolutely. And that move gave them a key regional hub, and it significantly cut their reliance on outside contractors. The next big step came in 2007 with the purchase of the old F&M Schaefer Brewing Company brewery in Briningsville, Pennsylvania.
Right, in the Lehigh Valley. That facility was a game changer. It had been used by Diageo to make Smirnoff Ice, so the infrastructure was already set up for large-scale beverage manufacturing.
Exactly. And by 2012, that Briningsville hub was producing a massive 2/3 of all Samuel Adams beer. It solidified BBCO's internal brewing capacity. The strategy is so clear when you look at it.
Use low-cost capacity, so contract brewing, to get your scale.
Right. And then consolidate production into your own high-volume facilities to control your quality and your costs long-term.
It's important to note, though, that despite the massive scale of these plants, they still maintain that connection to their origins. The company keeps a small R&D brewery in Boston, in Jamaica Plain, on the premises of the old Haffenreffer Brewery.
And that R&D site is vital. It's for tours, for tastings, for maintaining that local craft authenticity, even when the vast majority of their beer is coming from these huge facilities hundreds of miles away. It's like the symbolic heart of the brand.
Okay, now let's dive into the financial architecture, which, as you mentioned, is maybe Koch's most brilliant long-term strategic move. The 1995 initial public offering. BBK goes public on the NYSE, ticker SAM.
This is where that Harvard education really paid off. When BBCO went public, they used a dual-class stock structure. It's a model that was since become famous for protecting the founders of, high-growth tech companies.
And here's the key insight for anyone who wants to understand power within a publicly traded company. The shares that were sold to the public, the Class A common stock, they have no voting rights.
That is the absolute cornerstone of Jim Koch's sustained control and power. Koch owns 100% of the Class B common stock, which is a class that does carry the voting rights.
So what does that actually mean in practice?
It means that no matter how much Class A stock is bought or sold on the open market, and no matter how huge the company gets, Jim Koch retains absolute control over everything. Strategic direction, mergers, acquisitions, the company's whole identity.
So this structure allowed him to raise huge amounts of capital, which satisfied his early investors and funded all this expansion.
While completely insulating his decision-making from, say, shareholder activism or a hostile takeover, it's a really unusual structure for a 1995 IPO, especially for a beer company, and it gave him the freedom to pivot aggressively later on, which we're definitely going to see in the product portfolio.
That control is what facilitated their aggressive diversification and acquisition strategy. So let's fast forward to May 2019. One of the biggest headlines in the craft beer world drops.
Oh, yeah.
BBCO acquires the Delaware-based Dogfish Head Brewery for a huge sum, $300 million.
That was a monumental merger. It united two of the most significant founder-led craft pioneers, Jim Koch and Sam Kalogyian.
It was a massive industry consolidation move.
And significantly, as part of that merger, Sam Kalogyian and his wife Mariah, they became the second largest non-institutional owners of BBCO. So it created this powerful aligned leadership structure right underneath Koch's overarching control.
And the most recent strategic investment really signals where the financial focus is now, and it's even beyond traditional beer. In 2020, BBCO invested $85 million in their Cincinnati plant.
$85 million.
Specifically to quadruple its canning capacity.
And why would you need to quadruple your canning capacity? It's simple, but it's financially profound. It's to handle the explosive growth of its hard seltzers and its hard teas right alongside the beer.
It's a huge tell.
This massive infrastructure investment confirms it. While Samuel Adams Boston Lager is still the legacy flagship, the company's future financial growth is heavily dependent on the non-beer parts of its portfolio. It's a physical manifestation of that strategic pivot.
Speaking of that portfolio, let's shift focus to the products themselves. Because before they were a financial empire, they were known for technical quality. And the sheer boundary-pushing nature of some of their beers is what really earned the brand its initial reputation.
You have to start with the anchor, Samuel Adams Boston Lager. It's a 4.8% ABV amber lager, but the process is anything but standard. They use these traditional methods based on that rediscovered family recipe.
And those traditional methods are super demanding. They include decoction mash and krausening. We should probably explain what those are, because this is why the beer tasted so revolutionary back in 1985.
Okay, so let's start with decoction mash. This is a really complex multi-step mashing process. It often involves 4 different vessels. You take a portion of the mash, you boil it separately, and then you return it to the main mash.
That sounds time-consuming.
It's incredibly time-consuming, and it's very rare today. But its purpose is crucial. It enhances the malt flavor, it deepens the color, and it provides this unique mouthfeel and complexity that a simpler infusion mash just can't achieve.
Okay, what about krausening?
Krausening is secondary fermentation. It involves adding young, actively fermenting wort, they call it krausen, to the finished beer just before you package it.
So it carbonates in the bottle.
Essentially, yes. It creates a natural carbonation, which results in a finer, softer bubble and more complex, lingering flavors compared to just, force carbonating the beer with CO2 from a tank. Both methods require painstaking effort, and they really show Koch's commitment to quality over just speed.
And they dry hop the lager using two very specific, famous, noble hop varieties, the Hallertau Mittelfrüh and the Tettnang Tettnanger. Why are these noble hops so significant?
Noble is this historical classification for hops that are traditionally grown in specific regions of Europe. They're low in alpha acids, which means they provide less bitterness, but they're very high in aromatic oils.
So more aroma, less bite.
Exactly. They impart this delicate, spicy floral aroma without overwhelming the malt. It's perfect for a classic lager. This attention to detail is what defined their reputation, although it's worth noting, even this core product isn't static. In 2023, the Boston Lager was remastered with a change in the process to be, quote, easier drinking.
Okay, so here's where BB Co. shifts from being a traditionalist to a radical. Let's talk about the extreme line, where they just push the technical limits of fermentation, often setting world records for ABV.
The lineage for that starts back in 1994 with a beer called Triple Bock. This thing was a staggering 17.5% ABV.
Wow.
It had a black, opaque color, and critically, no carbonation at all. They even used maple syrup in the brewing process. When it came out, it was, simply put, the strongest beer brewed commercially at the time. It was the direct forerunner of their most exclusive line.
Which brings us to Utopias. First released in 2002, it was marketed as the strongest commercial beer in the world at 24% ABV when it launched. It's not just strong, it's a technical marvel.
It really is. The ABV has just steadily increased over the years. It hit 27% by 2007, 28% in 2019, and the upcoming 2025 edition reaches an astonishing 30% ABV.
How is that even possible through just fermentation?
That's the technical challenge. They have to achieve this high percentage through fermentation alone without any distillation, which would legally reclassify it as a spirit. They do it using unique yeast strains that can tolerate high alcohol and an extremely high-density wort.
And the ingredients in the aging process are just spectacular. It uses caramel, Vienna, Moravian, and Bavarian smoked malts, plus those four noble hops, Hallertau Mittelfrüh, Tettnanger, Spolter, and Saaz.
But the aging is the real key. It's matured in this complex cocktail of specialty barrels, scotch, cognac, and port barrels for nearly a whole year. This imparts this incredible complexity and smoothness, almost like a fine brandy or liquor.
The packaging and the price definitely reflect that exclusivity. It's a highly limited release, right? Usually only 9,000 to 12,000 bottles per vintage.
Yeah, and it's sold in this distinctive ceramic bottle that looks like a miniature copper-finished brewing kettle. It's beautiful.
And the price point.
It started at $100 back in 2002, which was a lot then, reflecting its rarity and intensity. The 2025 edition is priced at $240. Wow. However, this is where we run into the regulatory friction that really defines the challenge of extreme brewing.
Because that high alcohol content makes it flat out illegal in a number of states, right? Due to local laws limiting the percentage of alcohol in malt beverages.
The list is long, and it illustrates this massive regulatory headache that's involved in distributing Utopias. It's prohibited in states like Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Oregon, South Carolina, Vermont, West Virginia.
That's a lot.
Plus Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, Montana, Oklahoma, and Utah. The sheer fact that one of their most celebrated products is illegal in about a third of the country puts it in such stark contrast with their mass-market, low ABV stuff.
Shifting to other specialty styles, they had some pretty significant run-ins with industry definitions, particularly about their seasonal cranberry lambic, which they've been making since 1990.
This sparks a really crucial debate within the craft industry about style integrity and geographic protection. The issue is technical.
Right.
A traditional lambic isn't just a style. It's a spontaneously fermented beer that's generally only produced in the Pajottenland region of Belgium using the wild ambient yeast that's just in the air there.
And BB product is, well, demonstrably not spontaneously fermented in Pajottenland.
Correct. So brewers and serious beer drinkers charged that the name was mislabeled and misleading because it didn't adhere to that technical definition. Even the leading beer critic at the time, Michael Jackson, called it a misleading name.
So it raises this ethical question. By using the name lambic, even as an homage, was BB Co. just leveraging consumer confusion to market a product that was less technically demanding to make?
The company's defense was that they saw it as an homage to the style. They said they were celebrating the flavor profile without the pain and agony of it. This just highlights that tension between marketing shorthand and brewing purity that BBCO was often navigating.
They were also quick to jump into the IPA wars, which really defined craft beer in the 2010s. They came out with Rebel IPA in 2014.
Yeah, that was their West Coast style IPA. It was brewed with 5 distinct American hops: Cascade, Simcoe, Chinook, Centennial, and Amarillo.
And Rebel IPA spawned an entire line, right? Including Rebel Rouser, a double IPA. It shows they were committed to following popular trends. And before we move on from beer, we have to mention the fantastic historical footnote about Sam Adams Light.
Yes. When they introduced Sam Adams Light in 2001, there was genuine consideration given to naming it Turtle Adams.
Turtle Adams.
After Sam Adams' actual pet turtle. That little detail just highlights the kind of quirky entrepreneurial spirit that still existed even as they were becoming this massive corporation.
But the real story of the modern Boston Beer Company is that aggressive diversification. They became a multi-category beverage empire, moving way beyond traditional beer. And this is why that quadrupled canning capacity was so necessary.
They started pretty early, actually. They launched something called Hardcore Cider in 1997, which eventually evolved into the hugely successful Angry Orchard brand, launched in 2012. Cider was a critical bridge product for them.
Then came the high-volume hard malt beverages. Twisted Tea launched around 2000 or 2001, a 5% ABV malt beverage marketed as a hard iced tea.
And it found massive success, particularly in the American Southeast and in Alberta, Canada.
And, of course, the product that has just utterly defined their financial strategy in the last decade, Truly Hard Seltzer, introduced in 2016.
These non-beer brands are now absolutely vital to their scale and their growth. They also operate a bunch of subsidiaries, like the Traveler Brewing Company, which does shandies, Coney Island Brewing Company, and the LA-based Angel City Brewery. They really transitioned from being a craft brewer to being a holistic beverage platform.
It's just impossible to execute that level of growth and diversification without running into some intense scrutiny. And BBCO's actions, they often drew fire, especially when they were navigating industry definitions and marketing boundaries.
The biggest internal battle, really, was over the definition of craft brewery itself. In 2018, BBCO actively pushed for changes to that definition.
Why was that so important to them?
It was all about scale and categorization. The existing definition, which is generally set by the Brewers Association, had these strict limits on annual production and ownership structure.
And they were bumping up against those limits.
Exactly. As their portfolio shifted more and more towards ciders and seltzers, they risked no longer qualifying as a craft brewery, which affects everything from how your market data is reported to getting favorable tax implications.
So they were trying to change the rules of the club.
Essentially, yeah. Because they had outgrown the movement they helped start, they were seeking a new definition that would encompass independent brewers of traditional or non-traditional craft beverages.
They also courted some high-profile marketing controversies, sometimes with just disastrous public-facing results. The sponsorship of the radio show Opie and Anthony from 2000 to 2002 is a prime example of an edgy marketing strategy going completely sideways.
Oh, that was a mess. The sponsorship involved this radio promotion called Sex for Sam, which encouraged couples to have sex in public places.
That sounds like a bad idea from the start.
The marketing team was clearly trying to tap into this controversial, high-visibility demographic, and it culminated in an absolute public relations disaster. It resulted in the host being fired after a couple was charged with public lewdness for attempting to have sex in a vestibule at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City.
In St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Yes. In August of 2002, it just demonstrated the immense risks of associating a premium brand with overtly provocative content.
Another, maybe more culturally nuanced controversy centered on the words they left out of a commercial in 2013.
That was their Independence Day commercial. It quoted the Declaration of Independence, but it omitted the phrase, endowed by their creator.
And that drew immediate public outrage from critics who felt they were secularizing a core American text.
It did, but the company's defense was actually rooted in regulatory compliance. They cited the industry standard, the Beer Institute Advertising Code, which strongly advises that advertising should not include religion or religious themes.
So it wasn't necessarily a political statement on their part. It was a decision made to follow trade association rules, but it drew massive public backlash anyway. It just shows the incredible tightrope they have to walk as a national brand that's so associated with American heritage.
The company also faced legal challenges that are pretty typical of a massive corporation defending its intellectual property. In 2007, there was the Sam Adams versus Sam Adams trademark dispute in Portland, Oregon.
That's fascinating. A politician named Sam Adams runs for mayor of Portland, and the beer company goes after him.
Correct. BBSO demanded that the domain names of the mayoral candidate Sam Adams, things like samadamsformayor.com, be turned over to them.
Seriously.
Yeah. The company expressed genuine concern that consumers might confuse the politician with the beer brand. It just illustrates the aggressive, highly formalized defense of their name and their IP that's required when you operate at that scale.
And product safety hit them in 2008 when they issued their first major product recall.
Right. That recall was due to potential defects in glass bottles that they got from a third-party supplier. They estimated that less than 1% of the bottles might contain small pieces of glass.
Okay.
So they issued the recall out of an abundance of caution, and thankfully, no injuries were ever reported. However, the news still led to the company's shares temporarily dropping by more than 3%.
Wow.
It shows that even minor quality issues have significant financial implications when you're a public company trading on the NYSE.
And beyond just domestic challenges, they briefly pursued a very high-profile international collaboration with German brewing royalty between 2009 and 2011.
That was the global partnership called Infinium. It was with the Bayerische Staatsbrauerei Weinstephan, which is arguably the world's oldest operating brewery.
An amazing partner to have.
This collaboration produced a champagne-like brew, also named Infinium, with an ABV of 10.3%.
Yeah, the marketing around that was brilliant, playing so heavily on tradition.
It was marketed as the first new beer style created under the Reinheitsgebot in over 100 years, referencing Germany's traditional beer purity law. They released about 15,000 cases in North America, often positioning it as this prestige alternative to sparkling wine for, celebratory toasts.
Finally, we have to look impartially at the political context surrounding the founder himself. Jim Koch stepped into the political arena pretty publicly in 2018.
He did. And we should be clear here, we're just reporting on the events as they were reported and the reactions they caused.
Exactly.
At a White House dinner in August 2018, Koch publicly praised the 2017 corporate tax cut. His reported assertion was that the tax cut played a major role in helping BBSCO become more competitive against foreign competitors.
And what was his specific argument?
He pointed out a fact that really underpins his worldview. He said 85% of the beer made in the United States is owned by foreign companies.
So that statement, which he intended to frame the tax cut as a way to boost American independence against these global giants, it generated a swift and pretty intense public reaction.
Indeed. There was immediate criticism, calls for boycotts. There was a highly visible call from a Boston area mayor, and public protests were actually held near the brewery.
So, again, we're just reporting the facts of the statement and the reaction, but it shows that when you run a company so associated with American patriotism, every comment, even a seemingly simple business statement, can just ignite controversy when it's tied to a political context.
It perfectly illustrates the dual challenge. Jim Koch built the company on the idea of the small, independent American brewer, but once you operate at an international financial scale, you kind of lose the insulation of being small.
To balance that massive corporate and political profile, we really need to explore the philanthropic side of the Boston Beer Company. Jim Koch has invested heavily in supporting the next generation of small businesses, effectively paying forward his own experience of launching with just a little bit of capital.
This is primarily channeled through the Brewing the American Dream program, which Koch created back in 2008, right as the U.S. economy was facing a massive recession. It's an initiative designed specifically to help small entrepreneurs get their start, often within the food and beverage world.
The scale of this initiative is pretty staggering, and it deserves focus. As of 2015, the program had assisted more than 4,000 entrepreneurs.
And this isn't just mentorship, it's capital. They facilitate financing in partnership with a dedicated lending partner, Action, and they've made nearly 400 loans totaling an impressive $400 million.
$400 million in facilitated small business loans. That is a serious financial commitment to fostering the very ecosystem that they came from. It's a structural support system for small-scale food and beverage startups.
And it serves a few purposes, immense goodwill, obviously, but it's also an opportunity for BPSO to keep a finger on the pulse of the industry, spotting talent, trends, future partners early on. It shows a commitment to that American dream narrative that underlies the whole Sam Adams brand.
And that collaborative ethos, it extended to directly supporting their competitors during times of industry-wide strain. The source material is clear about this during the 2008 worldwide hops shortage,
Yes.
a critical ingredient crisis for brewers everywhere.
And this was a landmark moment of good corporate citizenship. Hops were scarce, prices were soaring, and instead of hoarding their supply, which they easily could have done to gain a competitive advantage,
Right.
BB&Co sold 20,000 pounds of its own hops at cost to 108 smaller craft brewers all across the United States.
Selling a critical ingredient at cost during a worldwide shortage, that is an act that must have earned them considerable, legitimate goodwill and respect within the craft community.
And it wasn't just a one-off publicity stunt either. They repeated the act, sharing hops again in 2012, which confirms it as this consistent policy of supporting a healthy, competitive landscape, even when they were the biggest player in the room.
Another great example of actively fostering that community is the long shot competition.
The Samuel Adams Long Shot American Homebrew Competition has been running since 1996. It allows amateur homebrewers to submit their creations for judging. And the prize is a genuine career booster.
What do they get?
They get to see their winning creation produced on a larger commercial scale and sold as part of a Samuel Adams mixed six-pack the following year. It provides this immediate, tangible path for amateur talent to gain commercial recognition.
Moving on to branding, the Boston Beer Company has just deeply woven itself into the cultural fabric, particularly in its hometown, through these major sports deals and, surprisingly, even appearances in high art.
The official sports sponsorships are just so heavily dominated by Boston pride. Starting in the 2018 season, Samuel Adams replaced Budweiser, the king of stadium beer, as the official beer of the Boston Red Sox.
That is a huge deal.
It's an 8-year deal that runs through the 2025 season.
That is massive visibility and a very deep, very visible partnership. The deal includes extensive signage at Fenway Park, the creation of a dedicated Sam roof deck, and crucially the right to use the Red Sox logo for marketing and contests.
And they solidified that connection by creating a specific product just for the team, Wicked Fenway IPA. It's a session IPA at 5.5% ABV, marketed as the official beer of the Red Sox. That kind of hyperlocal branding is incredibly powerful.
And the non-beer brands are also targeting specific, massive cultural demographics, right? Particularly Twisted Tea.
Oh, yeah. Since the 2021 season, Twisted Tea has been the naming sponsor of Team Twisted Tea Suzuki in the AMA Motocross and Supercross Championships.
That's a very specific audience.
Very specific. High energy, often a regional demographic. The exact market where Twisted Tea has seen its greatest success. It shows a really segmented approach to sponsorship.
Their cultural footprint stretches way beyond sports, too. I mean, take the media and arts recognition. In the 2015 musical Hamilton.
Right.
In the song Aaron Burr's Sir, the character John Lawrence sings the line, "I'm John Lawrence and the place to be 2 pints of Sam Adams, but I'm working on 3.
That is mainstream cultural integration at the highest level. When a brand like Samuel Adams is used as shorthand for American history and consumption in a Pulitzer Prize-winning musical, you know you've achieved true cultural resonance.
And even their seasonal offerings have earned serious recognition among connoisseurs. The seasonal Old Fezziwig brew, for example, won recognition as the best Christmas or winter beer in Massachusetts.
This company has really mastered the dichotomy. They can achieve extreme technical quality and win accolades for these hyper-specific styles, while at the same time executing high-volume, broad-appeal marketing through sports and pop culture across their entire portfolio.
So, let's bring this deep dive to a close and try to synthesize the journey of the Boston Beer Company. We've watched a 6th-generation family tradition get leveraged and scaled up by a sophisticated, Harvard-educated management consultant.
It's a remarkable trajectory, and it's defined by this strategic, almost bulletproof control. Jim Koch maintained complete long-term control over the company through his ownership of 100% of that non-publicly traded Class B voting stock.
And that dual-class structure is what allowed him to raise capital without any risk of external shareholders influencing or dictating the course of the business.
And that control is what facilitated a necessary and very aggressive diversification. They went from defining American craft beer with lagers and these extreme ABV beers to aggressively shifting their financial focus into massive, high-volume categories. Hard ciders, hard teas, and most critically, hard seltzers like Angry Orchard, Twisted Tea, and Truly.
That $85 million investment to quadruple canning capacity, It tells you everything you need to know about where the future revenue stream is projected to come from.
That capital investment signals a company that is prioritizing the efficient production of high-volume, lower-margin, mass-market flavored malt beverages.
And this presents a really interesting fundamental paradox that we've kind of explored throughout this whole dive. The company is simultaneously defined by two wildly different product strategies.
On one hand, you have the meticulous, technically demanding, noble hop-laden, barrel-aged, highly limited, extreme ABV beers like Utopias.
These are the products that cement the company's reputation as technical innovators. They require months of maturation in specialized barrels, adherence to complex, expensive brewing methods. They're restricted in a lot of states because of their alcohol content.
And they appeal only to the dedicated connoisseur who's willing to pay $240 for a single bottle.
And then on the other hand, you have the high volume, broadly flavored, approachable, mass market beverages that are driving the massive infrastructure investments and, frankly, the vast majority of the company's financial growth.
Which leads us directly to our final provocative thought for you, the learner. Given the intense technical specifications required for specialized products like Utopias, and the fact that its market access is restricted in nearly a third of the country due to its ABV, what does the future hold for extreme brewing within the Boston Beer Company?
Essentially, how does the spirit of the craft pioneer, the one who's making those $240 30% ABV ceramic bottle specialties, how does that coexist with a business model that's increasingly defined by high-volume mass-market products like hard seltzers, which now command the company's decisive capital investment strategy? That tension between heritage craft purity and financial necessity, that is the defining challenge at the heart of the billion-dollar beverage giant Jim Koch built.